Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1229 of the Juicebox Podcast. On today's episode, Erika Forsyth and I will launch a brand new 4-part series on resilience. This is episode 1. There'll be 3 more. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise, and always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. If you'd like to hire Erika, she can be found at erikaforsyth.com. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year's supply of vitamin D. drinkag1.com/juicebox. If you'd like to help with type 1 diabetes research and you're a U.S. resident who has type 1 diabetes or is the caregiver of someone with type 1, please go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and complete the survey. That's all you have to do, and you're helping. You can do it right from your phone or your couch or wherever. It takes about 10 minutes. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. I know that Facebook has a bad reputation, but please give the private Facebook group for the Juicebox Podcast a healthy once-over. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. US Med is where my daughter gets her diabetes supplies from, and you could too. Use the link or number to get your free benefit check and get started today with US Med. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense. The Eversense CGM is more convenient, requiring only one sensor every 6 months. It offers more flexibility with its easy on, easy off smart transmitter and allows you to take a break when needed. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Erika, I, after one of my fever dream showers, sent you a text message where I was like, I want to talk about resilience on the podcast. And you were excited. And I was excited that you were excited. But today's the day we're going to actually pick through maybe what a series is going to look like. I didn't know, honestly. Like, I didn't know, is this a conversation, takes an hour? Is it, take a week? And I want you to kind of talk to people about the steps you took after I proposed the idea.
Yes. So I think it will probably morph into a lot of different topics and themes as we discuss resilience, because what I have found, as kind of like when we were talking about ambivalence, is that we might all have a certain kind of understanding, and we know the word, we know the term. We heard it a lot around the pandemic, that this is, developing, everyone's becoming more resilient. And what I've learned is that even in the experts in the field, all the researchers, they have different ways to define and understand resilience, and even how one can become more resilient. And is it innate? Is it something that everyone can develop? Is it a privilege? So I think it'll be really exciting and interesting conversation.
Cool. I won't tell people that you said you wish you wouldn't have to see any of your clients this week so you could just read more about resilience. I'm sure that's not a reflection on them, but your excitement about the topic. So
yes, yeah. I found when you posed the idea, I think I went through my own process of thinking, like, I knew what it was. I know how I can help people and myself become more resilient. And then I realized, gosh, there's so many wonderful books and papers and research out there on it that I didn't even really understand. A lot of which I will quote and reference throughout our conversation. So I'm grateful for the suggestion. And I am curious as to what made you think about it, the topic of resilience.
As we may have talked about in the past, when the hot water hits the back of my neck, my brain seems to work better. And
well, mine too. Yeah.
Okay. And I feel 15 to 20 IQ points smarter in the shower than I do anywhere else. And I have to be honest with you, I don't recall what happened that made me say this out loud to myself, think it through, and then pose it to you. Other than to say that it's interesting, like there are times that people ask me, how did you build this podcast in a way that helps people? And, so it's a functional document, you know what I mean? That appears to work in a timeline. And you might think that that's been some like Machiavellian plan that I've been putting together for some time, or that I went to college about, planning things. Or the truth is I just follow my nose on this stuff. So I'm making my way through Arden's life with diabetes, which is making my way through my life with a daughter who has type 1 and all that comes with it. And as things, present themselves to me and I work through them, I feel like my understanding of the world is building. And at the same time, because of the podcast and my connection to so many people, and then the Facebook group with now 50,000 members in it, and I get to watch people have conversations and see these sort of like psychosocial things happen in real time, it just seemed to me like it was time to talk about this. So I don't really have another answer other than to say that maybe I'm in the part of my life where I want to understand this better. Because do I have it just because I grew up poorly? Do you know what I mean? Like, did somebody like imbue me with it when I was born? Like, did God go, here's 2 arms, 2 legs, and give him some extra resilience? Or did I just get put in situations over and over again that required it, but those situations weren't overwhelming enough that I was able to be resilient? Do you know what I mean? Like, they didn't break me instead. Like, it all seems very lucky to me, the entirety of it. I think who I am is lucky. And I think there are people who are struggling with things, and it's not because they're not resilient, and it's not because they're not smart or don't understand the world. I just think that you get put in things in the wrong order, or, you get a little too much of something and it overwhelms you at the wrong age or whatever. It could put you in a hole that you can't get back out of again, or at least maybe can't get back out of on your own. Anyway, I wondered if I was resilient on purpose or by mistake, I guess,
Those are great. Even as you are throwing out all those kind of wonderings, a lot of the research explores all of those things. How, why, when, what are the risk factors? What are the protective factors in developing resilience? And I know we even talked about this throughout all of our, time together recording various episodes, your story. And I thought about that of like, how did you not break? Right. Yeah. Like when you hear the concept resilience, a lot of people will use the analogy of like when a blade of grass is stepped on, it doesn't break. It might lay there for a while
and stands back up at some point.
It'll stand back up.
Yeah.
So like the bending instead of breaking concept.
But if a mower comes along, you're not putting it back together again. and right, like, so I mean, I've told a number of stories. Boy, I've said so much on this podcast. I will look back one day and think I shouldn't have told anybody that. But like, I've told stories about things like, being a kid and my dad wanting me to agree with him and starting off by hitting me with his hand. And then I went to the floor to try to avoid his hand. And then he, I guess in a desire not to bend over, just kicked me instead. And while that was happening, I consciously remember thinking I could just agree with him and this would stop. And then I thought, but he's not right. Now, in fairness, Erika, I don't know if he was right or not. And I don't know what the hell we were arguing about. Like, I have no remembrance of any of that. I just remember thinking I'm going to stand my ground. That's all. And it didn't matter if I was going to get hurt. He obviously wasn't hurting me too badly, because I imagine as a child, I would have given in. Do you know what I mean? Like, it might be. So first of all, I want to say that I'm not saying that there's levels of kicking somebody, but like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it was hard enough that it made me go, oh, well, okay. But so I was able to kind of like stay in the game. I also remember being turtled up and thinking that my mom's not helping me. And then later I thought, God, she must have been really scared if she didn't step in. Like, that whole thing. I didn't put it all together right away, but it's this one memory. Now, my point is that did I stick up to him because I'm a resilient person, or did that experience make me that way? Or did other little experiences make me that way along the way? And does that start right away with being adopted? Like, in being told when you're like, I've known I'm adopted for my entire life. Like, I do not know a moment I wasn't aware of it. But that's somebody telling you, hey, you had parents who said, someone else take this. you have to make your peace with that right away. Like somebody gave me away. And yes, all the other parts really nice. Somebody stuck up for me. Somebody made me their son, and I have a mother and a father and all that stuff. But man, someone just gave me away. Now I know adopted people, that crushes them. I didn't really care that much.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? You know what I mean? Like it's not, because I can't take credit for it. That's for certain. Are you going to help me figure out why I'm resilient?
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I think all of these points are definitely explored. Even, trauma as an infant, we'll talk about when is trauma. It does matter, right? When you learn about or experience the trauma, even trauma that you don't even remember, like when you were a newborn and adopted.
How do we know that? If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you are at risk for your blood sugar going too low. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready with Gvoke HypoPen. My daughter carries Gvoke HypoPen everywhere she goes because it's a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above that I trust. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. Luckily, Gvoke HypoPen can be administered in 2 simple steps, even by yourself in certain situations. Show those around you where you store Gvoke HypoPen and how to use it. They need to know how to use Gvoke HypoPen before an emergency situation happens. Learn more about why Gvoke HypoPen is in Arden's Diabetes Toolkit at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on the top of your kidneys called a pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called an insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information. Diabetes comes with a lot of things to remember, so it's nice when someone takes something off of your plate. US Med has done that for us. When it's time for Arden's supplies to be refreshed, we get an email. Rolls up and in your inbox says, "Hi Arden, this is your friendly reorder email from US Med." You open up the email, it's a big button that says, "Click here to reorder," and you're done. Finally, somebody taking away a responsibility instead of adding one. US Med has done that for us. An email arrives, we click on a link, and the next thing you know, your products are at the front door. That simple. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. I never have to wonder if Arden has enough supplies. I click on one link, I open up a box, I put the stuff in the drawer, and we're done. US Med carries everything from insulin pumps and diabetes testing supplies to the latest CGMs like the Libre 3 and the Dexcom G7. They accept Medicare nationwide, over 800 private insurers, and all you have to do to get started is call 888-721-1514 or go to my link, usmed.com/juicebox. Using that number or my link helps to support the production of the Juicebox podcast. Like, how can we say for sure that something that happened to me when I was 3 somehow sticks to me? Or like now they talk about generational trauma, right? Like, something could have happened to your parents that imprints on you somehow genetically. Like, where's the research that makes us comfortable saying that that's a thing?
I would suspect within neurobiology, scientists who are literally studying people's brains in conjunction with their story and in conjunction with their presenting symptoms and behaviors. And there are new measures that they have that we'll talk about. Also, I feel like now we're kind of doing an intro here, like the ACE measures, the adverse childhood experiences, where I want to talk about that a little bit. That came out about 25 years ago, but became really kind of hot about 3 to 5 years ago. That is, I am not an expert in the neurobiology brain research field, but from what I've learned and gathered, my understanding is that they can track that based on those things I just said.
Well, I mean, it seems common sensey, right? Like, I don't know. You've Jewish people have been through the Holocaust, and then you get a generation of fearful people who think God, they're going to come and get us, and then that doesn't happen, but they still have that fear. Then that imprints on their kids, and then their kids move forward in that kind of nervous, like, that kind of thing. Like, I know it sounds like I'm generalizing, but I mean, I think that's pretty obvious that impacts a lot of people. It's not everybody. I've heard people talk about the potato famine and how you might be able to trace Irish, like, people having more, what's the word when you don't feel happy? It's such a simple word. I can't believe it's fall out of my head. No. People take medications. Depressed. Oh my God. It's late in the day. Now people are going to be like, he couldn't remember depressed. How are we going to listen to anything else he said? Sorry. But like, I've heard people say.
I couldn't come up with it quick enough, apparently.
And you're a professional. So I'm just a dummy who learned how to use this microphone. So this is your fault. But yeah, like there can be depression through Irish lineage, and that they talk about like those years where those people just didn't have any food. Maybe it's imprinted in your wiring, but maybe also it's just the way it makes people feel. Like, you even talk about like generational issues with money. Like I remember years and years ago when the hurricane was in New Orleans. It's a very long time ago. And I had a neighbor who said to me, well, why don't they just leave? And I said, because they have generational issues with money. I said, they might not be able to afford to leave. And I said to him, I was like, try to imagine that for the love of owning an automobile, you can't save your own life. And, it's not, oh, they should work harder, or it's you grow up with the expectation that this is your life. And you see that in diabetes, by the way, from people who say like, oh, I have the sugars. It's going to come and get me, just like it comes and got my grandmother. Mm-hmm. They believe they have a path that they're already set on. And anyway, it's just, it's kind of fascinating. So
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could come up with a lot of different examples, like, people who were raised after the Great Depression, or during the Great Depression and after. It's lots of studies on the fear of not having enough, right? All of those things. And is that, as with the question I think that you're asking, is that something that is learned? Is it within their genes? Is it through stories that then you kind of absorb that, right, those thoughts and feelings and symptoms? It's probably a little bit of everything. Is
it a part of us, like a psychosis that just befalls all of us? Did you know that there's very little history of people complaining of lower back pain prior to World War II? People say that we came home and built nice houses and put lawns around them and everybody's life got easier and you had more time to think about yourself.
I did not know that.
That simple idea that, like, you weren't as focused on like, I got to make money today because I got to buy food or we're all going to die. Mm-hmm. Like life became easier for people, and that gave them more time to consider themselves. I mean, there's arguments being made right now in public that, and I don't know, even I don't have a stance on it, but that maybe even too much therapy could give you too much time to think too much about yourself, like that kind of an idea.
Yes. And we will talk about that too. I'm so excited.
Go ahead. You go. You pace me through this then. What really caught your eye? What do you think this conversation is going to end up being about?
I think today, as we're already kind of, even in your questions, you're reflecting on all the different themes that could come out of the conversation of resilience. And even just the concept of resilience is a natural human phenomenon. That's why, some researchers say that's why we're still alive as we evolve, because we are a resilient species. And I think if we just started off with trying to talk about resilience, I might understand resilience different from you. Okay. Just like, right? So we want to just understand and acknowledge that resilience, which in general, I think the easiest definition of resilience is one of my favorites. And I will quote Dr. Brene Brown, as well as Dr. Bruce Perry throughout our conversations, and Oprah as well. They wrote a book recently, Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah, on what happened to you. And then Brene Brown has lots of different books on resilience and vulnerability. And Dr. Brene Brown, defines resilience as the ability to overcome adversity. I think it's a very simple definition, but even in that is the word adversity that I want to get into later, whether it's today or another episode, because adversity will look and feel different to all of us. And so I want to define and talk about that along with trauma. The other Dr. Ann Maston, who created the resilience theory, she talks about how it's just an innate human capacity. So something that you were kind of wondering, Scott, is we're all born with the ability to become resilient, but at what point is it a skill? What point is it something that you've mastered? At what point do you need to work on it? That's what we want to talk about. It's just she really focuses on the adaptation part.
Okay.
When we think about resilience and positive psychology, which we'll talk about also, I wanted to define it through Dr. Ann Maston's the capacity of a system to withstand or recover from significant disturbances, whether that's trauma, adversity, that threaten its adaptive function, viability, or development. So she really looks at resilience as this kind of interruption. We have all these different systems in our body. When it's interrupted, then do you have the ability to keep functioning to survive and then even thrive and grow through that?
Right.
Should I pause or keep going?
I just wanted to add that when I think of being resilient, I don't necessarily think of it always as me overcoming the adversity, but more as just not giving up because of the adversity. So I don't have to win to be resilient, like in my mind.
Correct.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
And that's
all.
Yes.
That's my one thought after listening to that.
Yes, winning. So that's interesting. So the resilience, as I was describing it, felt like overcoming it, meaning like you had the adversity, you had the trauma, and then you're on the other side of it.
Like there's triumph at the end.
There's triumph.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I have a weird way I think about the timeline of life. Like I'm not looking to win every second of the day.
Mm-hmm,
right.
Mm-hmm.
So if a couple of days turn into a couple of bad weeks, turn into a bad month, I'm all right. Like, if my basic needs are covered and I haven't given up in my heart and in my mind, then I'm being resilient. There's a way to be killed by the thing, to kill the thing, or to stay in the fight, it feels to me. And I think as long as you're in the fight, that's not bad. If you can come on the other side of it eventually, I think that's obviously optimal and what you're shooting for. But I wonder sometimes if people give up too soon. That's all. Because they think I've already tried. How come I haven't won? Does that make sense?
Yes, because one of the key markers or factors of someone who's resilient is something that the concept you've talked about a lot, that you are a perpetually hopeful person.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to have hope in these harder, more challenging situations, that's part of being and becoming resilient.
Okay.
That even when you're down and out, you're going to keep looking. You're going to problem solve. You're going to look for other resources. You're going to look for help. Mm-hmm. You're going to ask for help.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I can easily, like if I wanted to be bombastic, I could say I don't give up. But I could also tell you that my problems were lower middle class white people problems. Do you know what I mean? Like my parents were divorced and a guy hit me some and we didn't have any money. But I didn't have any money, but I still was like sheltered. Like we didn't have any money, but we ate. Like, you know what I mean? Like mm-hmm. I wasn't homeless. I wasn't without food. I wasn't being molested. Like, do you know what I mean? Like there were plenty of levels of worse under where I was standing. So it's easy for me to say I was resilient, but I don't know if you put me in one of those other situations, I might be dead. And maybe on my last breath, I would have told you I fought as long as I could have. Like, I'm not saying that everybody's got the same fight, obviously, but it is interesting to watch people in a fight that you fought and won give up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is because of all these other different factors about who you are, your personality, the protective factors, the community, right? Like, did you have one of the things that we will talk about also extensively is the support system? Did you have, while maybe your father wasn't a safe place for you, mm-hmm. perhaps did you have other places of connection where you felt like you were seen and your life mattered?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because I felt very safe with my dad. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a big, like, protective person for me. I mean, even as we're talking about like your perspective to judge something, like my perspective about my resilience based on my experience.
Yeah.
Also, I think your perspective about getting your ass kicked by your dad in the 70s is different than trying to think about it in 2024 too.
That's right.
Right. So my expectation, I have to be honest with you, through my life was that if I didn't listen, like someone was going to smack me. So I don't know that it was as shocking as it would be now, as if I like just backhanded Arden out of nowhere if she said something cross to me. Like I literally, like we try very hard not to say it out loud, but my wife and I later will be like, yo, you would have got your ass kicked for that, right? And like, you know, and I'm like, no, 100%. It is a lot of perspective. Like I like the way we're moving, don't get me wrong, but I think if we all were magically woken up in 1971, you wouldn't think as much about things as we do now when we look in hindsight, if that makes sense.
Yes, but I would also want to highlight that as we are looking at these childhood adversities, like through the ACE tool, they have done a lot of research noting that people who have had 3 or more adverse childhood experiences, and that's kind of like the conflict, divorce, neglect, abuse, they've made these links to that there's a higher predictability of having chronic illness or mental health problems.
Alcoholism?
Yeah.
All right. The podcast is sponsored today by Eversense CGM. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. With Eversense, there's no need for frequent sensor changes. No more sensors falling off, fewer failed sensors, and less skin irritations. And that means more comfort. With Eversense, you only need one sensor insertion every 6 months, and there's no need for constant sensor changes, which means less hassle. There's also no need to carry extra sensors with you, so that's less stuff to worry about. And you can say goodbye to unexpected disruptions from sensors falling off or being knocked off because the Eversense CGM is implantable and the sensor stays comfortably in place for 6 months. The Eversense sensor is incredibly durable. And of course, that means fewer frequent unexpected sensor errors that happen before the end of the suggested wear time. But what do you really want to know about? Accuracy. The Eversense CGM performs exceptionally over its 6-month life. If you'd like more details or are interested in getting started, use my link, eversensecgm.com/juicebox. I'll be telling you a lot more about Eversense this year, so make sure you pay attention to upcoming advertisements. There you'll learn about the implantable sensor, the smart transmitter, and their mobile application. The Eversense CGM lasts up to 6 months, eliminating the hassle and discomfort of frequent sensor insertions. Simply put, it makes managing your diabetes so much easier. eversensecgm.com/juicebox. The things that a person like me, who's very willing to generalize about everything, can sit back and go, oh, that happened to you. I bet this is coming now. And stuff actually does come statistically, right?
Gotcha. Yes. Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah. Okay, good.
So, and some people might see resilience as getting through, making it. Some people see it as getting through, overcoming, and really thriving. I love the one thing that Oprah talks about in this book with Dr. Bruce Perry is there's the post-traumatic stress, but then there's post-traumatic wisdom. I think is really significant too.
If I'm not mistaken, and I'm not 100% sure, but Oprah suffered some sexual trauma, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So I haven't read their book cover to cover, but I'm planning on it as we continue to talk through the series. I know she talks about that in her book as well. Yeah.
This is my remembrance from the 80s and daytime television.
Yes. And she was one of the first people really to be, vulnerable in that way and make it okay to talk about. So it was really significant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Keep going. I'm happy. I'm excited. So
yes, good. So I think there's this cultural piece too, I think is significant when we talk about resilience. Michael Unger, who was part of the Resilience Research Center, defines it as the human capacity to navigate and negotiate culturally meaningful resources to sustain their well-being. So when we think about it, resilience, there's kind of these internal skills that can grow and you can adapt. There's also really significant external source of support, whether it be through your immediate family, through community members, through other cultural factors that are significant, your faith, your spirituality, your church. So I think that's important to note too.
Mm-hmm.
The research really focuses on the significance of being in connection and community with people is a key factor of being able to be resilient.
Yeah. So cultural importance is big.
Yes.
I also, as you were talking about that, it occurred to me that I'm adopted. I have two brothers and a mom and a dad who were all related to each other. And they handled things very similarly, the four of them. And I was very much different. Like I would have different reactions to problems that would arise. Like they'd all think like, do this. And I'd be like, that doesn't make any sense. We should be doing this. And I would say probably not that my brothers aren't resilient, but I have literally no give up in me. Mm-hmm. Like none. Mm-hmm. Like if I murdered somebody, Erika, I would say I didn't do it right up until the very end. Okay. Like as you were pulling the switch, I'd be like, it wasn't me. You're making a mistake. So it would be my last words. You're messing up. I didn't do it. And like, so like, but I don't see barriers. Something happens and I pivot. Like every time I never, and if somebody says to me, "F you," I go, "Oh no, f you." Like I don't sit and take that. Like if you put something on me like that, I will gather myself and come back at you 10 times as hard as you came at me. That's a thing that on a personal level, I had to learn to modulate. Obviously, as I got older, on even like a business level, like if people f with me, I do not take it. I can't tell you how many times I've said to somebody, I'd be happy to die on this hill, even though I know this hill is completely unimportant. And so like seriously, like I'm not an aggressive person in public, but if somebody approached me, I would think to myself, well, okay, then I guess this is what I have to die for, like right here and now. And I have that feeling intellectually. I have it in my business practices. I said to somebody recently in a business practice, I was like, if you're not happy, I'd be happy to give your money back. And they were like, no, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, I mean, I'm not doing this with you. Like, you don't own me. Like, we're not doing this like this. And it would have been a significant detriment to me financially. And I did not care. Like, and that's just, I have that feeling about everything. My brothers, at some point, they'll give in. Like, this is as good as it's going to be. I'm going to stop fighting now. Like that kind of thing. My mom was exactly the same way. So anyway, I'm sorry. I'm hoping people hear something about their life in the conversation, which is why I'm telling so many stories. But
yeah, it's hope. It's hope. And the problem solving and the conviction, there's like a conviction and belief system there that has, we don't know one because I'm not your therapist, but I also don't do brain scans. But somewhere in there, it became a core, like those neural pathways when they were formed as an infant, you were like your fighter.
Is some of it capacity? I try not to say the word IQ out loud a lot, but like think of it more as like memory in a computer, like just computing space, right? Like is some of it capacity? Is some of it a male-female thing sometimes? Like do women get more protective or men get more attacking, like generally speaking?
I don't know about the male-female data in resilient research. I can't remember and I'll have to find it. I think there is a capacity kind of ability, but I don't want to say that for sure because I can't remember. I can't recall. I don't have it here in my notes, but I'm going to look for it.
But it also looks different with other, because like you can, like a mother's a good example, right? Like how many marriages end when a woman decides, I can't let my child be around this anymore. Like I'll stop being happy. I'll stop feeling fulfilled. I'll stop on the path that I wanted my life to be on to protect this kid. Like mothers do those things. I don't know that men do that as much. Do you know what I mean? Like it seems to me like men do more of a, like what I just talked about. Like I'll just kill everything and make it better. Do you know what I mean? Like I'll just win and that'll be better. Where women might be like, look, there's no protected spot here. And their resilience might look like giving up when I think it's just a different kind of resilience. Like I actually think it's a bigger resilience, if that makes any sense. Like the ability to say, I'm going to walk away from a husband that I love, but is maybe just not a good father, or I don't know, uses drugs and is a bad example for my kids or something like that. I'm going to walk away from that. Like, I think that's resilient. I think some people could see that as quitting, but I can see where that's resilience too, you know?
Yes. But, and, I will
Stop me from generalizing.
be
Go ahead.
resistant in generalizing gender maneuvers. But yes, I think resilience is exactly that, is defined differently as you kind of perceive and narrate that story.
Right.
Is that resilience because you're overcoming the adversity of whatever's happening in that marriage or family system. But someone else might look at that and say, well, she's quitting on the marriage or quitting on the family. But she's, or he is looking at it as, no, I'm overcoming this adversity and we're going to move on and grow in this other way.
There's bravery in doing that, right? Like there is. And it could be, obviously it could be a male or a female. I've talked to a lot of people. I've heard that story from 3 guys and from 50 women. Like, like when someone reaches out to me privately and says, hey, I don't know what to do. My husband or my wife doesn't take my kids' diabetes as seriously as I do. I mean, 99% of the time, that's a woman telling me that a husband doesn't take it seriously. It's very uncommon. It's infrequent, but it happens in the other direction. Anyway, it is an overgeneralization based on my experiences, not based on my opinion. I hope that's clear. Whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I hear that.
Okay. So positive psychology, is that what we're moving to?
So we kind of understand, and I always want to we'll go back to this evolution of the definition of resilience throughout. But I think just holding this kind of growing, kind of sustaining, surviving, and overcoming adversity in general is kind of what I'm operating out of. But even though we know that it like leads to different thoughts.
Yep.
So in that, I think in around the late 1990s, early 2000s, kind of resilience was becoming more of a discussion. That's when the ACEs were, I think, originally created, even though, as I said, they didn't become kind of hot until a few years ago. The president of the APA, which is the American Psychological Association, his name is Martin Seligman. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. He kind of made this observation that for the past, 50 years or so, psychology was really focused on the psychopathology of people. And, that through the DSM, through diagnosis, creating the focus and emphasis on psychology was trying to heal from this past damage, right? So you're in that focus of trying to heal from your past trauma. At the same time, he was noticing that we were neglecting and not focusing on people's strengths, their ability to overcome these hard things. It was just kind of like, let's replay, and I think there's a really important aspect to that, to understand what happened to you, which informs why you're feeling a certain way today, and then heal and move forward. But it was so much focused on just the psychopathology.
Okay.
That's kind of when positive psychology was, the inception of that was created, which is, the definition is the study of human flourishing and an applied approach to optimal functioning. So it's also defined as the study of strengths and virtues that enable individuals, communities, and organizations to thrive. And so people hear positive psychology, and it's not just like positive mindset, like be happy. There's really an emphasis on understanding someone's strengths, even as they've gone through the adversity.
Yeah. Focusing on what they are and what they could be again, not what they aren't and where they're falling short or what they've had taken from them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Taken from them or not been given to. So it is a focus on the positive emotions and experiences and virtues and strengths, which is kind of connected to some of the resilience theme of understanding your, like, even in the midst of the adversity, knowing, like, as you've already referenced, like your ability to keep going, the hope and the positivity that you can make it through. That's kind of the focus of the positive psychology. And we can get into that now or even in further episodes.
Well, let me just say this. I remember, I don't know how old I was, but I remember coming to the conclusion that I didn't start on level ground and that part of my life was going to be getting back to what was equitable and fair. Like, I wasn't even at my starting point yet. And I wonder how many people either A, don't recognize that they were poorly parented or grew up in a bad situation and that they've been put in a hole to start out. It's almost like taking two flowers and planting one in the sun and one in the shade, and just, one in the shade just doesn't do as well. But one day you realize it and you walk out into the sun and you're 2 years behind the other flower and you got to catch up. Like, I just remember thinking, oh geez, like, I have all these thoughts about the world in my head and my ideas about myself and what I want to do, but I don't just get to wander outside, go to college, and then take a vacation and start working and find my way through the world. Like, I have a lot of other things to conquer just to even get back to that space. And then once I got to that space, it was too late. Like, chronologically, my wife was like, are you going to go to college? And I was like, no, like, we don't have time for that now. Like, it took me all this time to be a person. like now I've got to, I can't. I took one college class. I got an A. And my wife said, see, you can do it. Go get a degree. And I said, no, I can do it. I don't need the degree. And that it's funny because her personality was like, oh my God, I didn't even know if you could do this, but you obviously can. So go do it. And I thought, no, that was enough. I proved it to myself. I'm good. Like, I can make my way on my own. I don't need to go to college. But the point there is that recognition of, oh my God, some people start on a cleaner slate than I do. And I can either sit around and, I guess, complain about that, or I can work to clean the slate off so I can get going. But it's tough once you start seeing how long it takes. I mean, it was for me, at least.
Yes.
But where do you want to move to? Don't ask me what we should talk about next. Okay. You should tell me.
I think let's keep kind of doing, I think it's feeling good overview. To kind of do a brief overview. And then, because I feel myself wanting to go deeper into all these things, but then we're not going to just do a brief overview.
Yeah.
Okay.
So far we've talked about what resilience is, positive psychology. And we're going to just, in these last 20 minutes or so, we'll go over the other kind of big topics that Erika and I are going to come back around and dig deeper in coming episodes. Make sense? Okay.
Sounds great.
Go ahead.
So in our next topic, I think it would be important for us to really dig deep into understanding what is adversity and connected to that trauma. Because there's been a lot of, it's very common today for us to define, like, I've had a traumatic background. Is being diagnosed with diabetes and living with diabetes a traumatic event? I would say yes. Is it a chronic trauma? And so I would love to spend some time understanding. Dr. Bruce Perry differentiates between capital T trauma, kind of like a one-time incident, versus little t trauma, and how that can become the way it's presented in your body, and then how you present externally a big T trauma.
Okay.
In that discussion, I think we could go further into PTSD. There's been a little bit of research in PTSD and chronic illness. And I'm going to go find the person who created that. Dr. Donald Edmondson created the enduring somatic threat model of PTSD. And so I think that could be a really interesting conversation around that, specifically around the diabetes.
Yeah, for sure.
So kind of looking at what is trauma and adversity, how can we understand that concept, and connecting that to PTSD, and we can talk about and chronic illness. There isn't a lot. I could not find any research around PTSD and type 1. There is some more links around PTSD and type 2, but then also conversely, chronic illness leading to PTSD.
I see.
Yes, go ahead.
I just was doing that math in my head, the chronic illness leading to the PTSD. And then thinking but PTSD could also lead to some chronic illness.
Correct, because of inflammation. Yeah, there's a lot more research on that.
Okay. About inflammation and how it starts to impact your body and everything, your morphology.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. In this discussion, though, I would love for us to spend some time on the concept of privilege, which is connected to resilience. And this is where Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah, and also Brene Brown in one of her podcast episodes, they go into this idea that people who develop PTSD, and they'll give we talk about like kind of combat PTSD, but people who develop traumatic symptoms and behaviors have a higher probability that earlier in life they experienced what some of the ACEs, right? Like chaos, threat, neglect, abuse. And so because of that, I want to make sure I'm explaining this clearly. When you experience chaos or trauma, your stress response system is activated. In a kind of a privileged upbringing where stress is more kind of regulated and kind of expected, your stress response system has time to respond and adapt, thus creating more resilience or your ability to become resilient.
Because you're not trapped in that initial traumatic situation. Or you might even have parents or a support system who can help coax you through it, or like there's a lot, because privilege can mean a lot of things in this space, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking about privilege is the privilege of feeling safe and secure. And when you're a child or even an infant, when there's any activation of your stress response, if it's uncontrollable, unpredictable, prolonged, or extreme, the research and data shows that leads to traumatic changes in your brain and functioning, thus making it more challenging to develop the resilience. And so that's why they talk about that, how resilience can be defined as a privilege because of this data in the response of the kind of pre and post trauma.
It's interesting.
It is.
Can those brain changes be reversed, or are you stuck with them?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's where there is hope. It is harder. For example, I'll just talk about the combat. I think it's a really interesting example.
Okay.
They talk about people who developed combat related PTSD. So like you go to war and everyone's exposed to the same. I'm talking about if you're in military.
Yeah.
Everyone's exposed to the same type of war. But the people who developed combat related PTSD have a probability of an earlier life. This is what Dr. Bruce Perry says, an earlier life that's permeated with all of that chaos, threat, neglect, and abuse than individuals who have that same combat exposure.
Okay.
Who don't develop combat related PTSD.
Right.
That's what the data is saying. So there is this, because of this early childhood exposure to prolonged and extreme trauma, they had a higher chance of developing the combat-related PTSD because their stress response system was already sensitized to it.
Does that have anything to do with them choosing the military?
Oh, I don't know.
An interesting question, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Because, I mean, I don't want to use an offensive word, Erika, but I'm a big pussy, and there's no way I would say, I'll do that, but I've been through some shit. So I can see where, I mean, like you're just being generalizing. You think, oh, I could see maybe where people who have been through something might be, but I see both sides of it. Maybe they'd be drawn to violence and maybe they'd be drawn to stay away from it too. Do you know what I mean? Like that's why I ask, because I wonder which it is or if it's different for everybody. Yes.
And I think that I love that because that kind of goes into this concept of the privilege of regulation. This is Brene Brown's stuff, where she talks about, can you apply that same thing to vulnerability and curiosity? And if you're feeling safe, if you have a history of feeling safe and secure, you might be more apt to go out and be curious and try new things, try risky things.
Right.
Versus children who were raised in an environment in which they felt not safe or secure, they are often less apt to go out and be vulnerable and curious and try risky things.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting question about, I'm sure there's research out there about who goes into the military based on their prior experience.
Because I can definitely see the desire to want to say if I hit a kid, they'd be prone to violence. But I could more see if you hit a kid, they'd want to avoid it. Like that, or, who knows? Probably no different than you hear people all the time say, you see your parents when you're growing up and you either decide to become them or fight against what they are.
Yeah, right.
Like, so maybe that's just a coin flip in there. But anyway, okay, I didn't mean to get stuck on that, but okay.
No, I think it's a good question. I think it's really important for us to kind of dig into that question, because ultimately we're still kind of trying to talk about and understand this resilience concept about how do you does it matter? Does your story matter? Does your history matter based on how you can become resilient? Right.
I mean, we'll talk about it more when we get to that episode, but like what I'm hoping people are hearing, I hope they're not hearing the war like example. I hope they're hearing like, am I responding to something to do with my diabetes because of something that happened to me when I was a kid, or the way I grew up around, I don't know, blah, 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 that when I get to my doctor's office and I've got my great A1C, I listen to the podcast and I got my great A1C and I'm super happy and excited and I'm confident I know what I'm doing. And the doctor says, I want you to move your A1C up. I don't like this. And they'll go, okay, like, what is that? Like, how does that happen? If someone said that to me, I don't know that I could stop from laughing at them. But more people I hear from just put their head down and do it. And like, then when I talk to them, they say, I don't know, I don't like confrontation. But maybe there's a reason for that. You know what I mean?
Yes. And maybe, I mean, again, I wouldn't say this applies to all of the examples that you are maybe kind of summarizing, but I think maybe one of our themes or episodes could be talking about behaviors that are adaptive, that keep you alive as a child. Is it people pleasing in this example? If you are in an environment in which you have learned how to become a people pleaser to stay alive, I'm thinking kind of in the extreme. Yeah. Or like a lot of people who've grown up in houses of addiction or abuse, many people develop that kind of sense of like, you know how to read the room. You're going to predict outcomes. You know how to stay safe. And sometimes that can be people pleasing, but then at some point in your life, that adaptive behavior that kept you alive as a kid is now becoming problematic as an adult. Yeah. And one question that I love that Oprah often talks about is, when is it time to let go of a behavior when it no longer serves you? Right.
Yeah, because what happens
it maybe kept you alive.
Yeah, when people pleasing started, like, because like if I was nice, then guy didn't hit me. Like, right. But now I'm an adult and I'm getting walked all over. And by the way, it's possible sometimes you're being walked over by a person who doesn't know they're walking all over you because you're people pleasing so 1,000 miles an hour. I think this is what you want. You know what I mean? I'm like, she seems to like it. Like, you know what I mean? Or she wants to go see that movie. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and then you find out later, like, I didn't want to do that. Like, you like, well, why didn't you say something? Like, you know, like that. Listen, we bought a house. And years later, my wife's like, I didn't want that house. And I was like, you never said that. And we never got deeper into it than that. I was just like, why didn't you tell me? Like, and maybe this is it. Maybe she, you know, I think back, my wife grew up with alcoholic parents. Maybe she was just like, I don't want to rock the boat. You know what I mean? She's got no trouble rocking the boat now. I just want you to know. So don't worry about it. She figured it out. Boats going back and forth constantly.
Oh my goodness.
All right. Okay. So there's hope, everybody.
I don't know. I don't know, Kelly. I'm just laughing at the reference.
Yeah, no, trust me. She'd laugh too, because she knows nothing. She doesn't make anything easy for me. So I she's getting back at me maybe for the house thing. Who knows? By the way, the house is delightful. Everybody loves it. So whatever. All right, what are we moving to? So that was PTSD, chronic illness.
So we talked about that, or kind of earlier. Yeah, the PTSD and chronic illness. We talked about referencing the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences.
Yep.
I think it'd be important for us to talk about, and I already alluded to it in the beginning in defining resilience, but what are the common factors of resilient people? And in that conversation, I think it's really important to talk about the community aspect. A lot of the research, as I referenced, discusses and highlights that it's all about connection. I love this quote from Dr. Perry. Says, the best predictor of your current functioning is your current connection. And I was thinking about this in reference to diabetes and how in the beginning, and even at any point in the stage, it can feel so isolating, even though you might have a good family, a good partner, good social support. Just even the act of you're the only one who really gets it. If you're the one person living with type 1 or you're the caregiver, even that in itself can be really isolating. I wanted to throw that in there. We'd dig deeper.
Dig into that. Yeah.
On that. Yeah.
It's great. That's fantastic.
I think would be really important for us to, at any point, how does one develop resilience? Let's say as you go through and we discuss all these things and you connect or relate to that you have either big T or little t trauma, you understand that you maybe have had moments of resilience. And I think that's also important to say, like, you can have different seasons in your life where you might feel more resilient than others.
Sure.
It doesn't mean you didn't lose the skill. It's just based on all these other factors that are at play in your life. But I think it'd be important to talk about kind of the reframing of trauma, the kind of the restructuring of how you look at that trauma is important, whether it's through grief and loss kind of processing or the restructuring, and then tips on how to develop more of that resilience, right? If you are saying, gosh, but I have all these ACEs, I've had major trauma in my life, I'm living with this chronic illness, and I feel like my resilience scores are low. How do I develop resilience? So I thought we could maybe talk about it. It's easy to name a list off of things, but I thought maybe we could hopefully get into that conversation deeper, deeper ways.
That's fantastic. So, well, listen, I mean, I'm always going to come from this perspective of that I just don't see, with life being such a finite thing, I don't see the virtue in giving up ever. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, no matter how bad things are getting, I think you should be fighting till the end. Because fair enough, if you get to the end and you're like, oh, all right, I can't do it anymore, then go ahead and lay down and die. It's fine. But don't give up a day before or a week before or 5 years before. Just stay in it, because, I mean, what else is there? It's funny when I say things like that, I mean that in such a hopeful way. And I imagine it doesn't sound like that at all. But I really do mean that in a really like kind of bountiful way. Like, this is life. Like, it might not be what you were hoping it was going to be, but this is it. And so there's two decisions. There's lace them up and fight, and there's lay down and die. That's sort of it to me. Like, and day to day, that is going to look different. You said there'll be seasons. Like, there are days I don't feel like fighting. Like, trust me, I have work. I go, we'll make that call tomorrow. Like, I'm not looking to do that today. But when push comes to shove, Scotty shoves. Like, so, like, I want to get everybody into that mindset of like, I can fight for this thing for myself. I just have too many conversations with too many people who do well. And I don't see much difference between them and the people who are struggling. And this resilience thing to me is the piece of it that's either misunderstood or inequitably doled out or something. And I'd love to learn more about it so people can listen along. So I really appreciate you doing this. It's going to be great.
Yes. I look forward to it.
Yeah, I know. It's
Thank
excellent.
you.
No, my pleasure. So tell here in this last couple of minutes, like, how many episodes do you think this is going to end up being?
We did already kind of defining resilience and positive psychology. I think next time we can go into the trauma. What is trauma and adversity? I think resilience and privilege could be one. PTSD and chronic illness, the ACEs, the community connection piece, what makes up resilience. Maybe like 5 or 6 more.
Okay. Sounds good.
I think, but don't quote me on that.
Well, if it's more, it's more. If it's less, it's fewer.
Yes. Yeah. Nice.
Wait, yeah, thank you. I was just trying to like alliterate there with it's fewer, by the way. And by the way, there's a good example. My wife beat that into my head over years. I'd say less. She'd go, you mean fewer? And I'd go, okay, thank you. And then one day I just was like, and now I say it. But anyway.
You learned, you adapted.
Oh, when I first met her, though, she wouldn't have said anything when she was younger.
So she advocated and communicated, and then you received and adapted.
I can't wait to talk about this, because little things, even like that, it's so much about the grace you want to give somebody, because I could absolutely see someone saying, oh yeah, sure, because she was pretending to be nice while she was trying to get you to marry her, which is a common thing you hear to people. But I don't think that. I just think that the way she grew up, she was prone to just kind of acquiesce sometimes. And then as we got older and she had more experiences and blossomed, she was able to say what she meant, not what she thought somebody else was willing to, tolerate from her, And so anyway, I hope people listen with an open mind, because you might hear things like that you have a knee-jerk reaction about, and then listen through and think, oh, okay, maybe not. Because it's just very simple, Erika, and you see it all the time in popular culture. For people who are succeeding to look at people who aren't succeeding and go, well, they're just not resilient. That's all. Back in the day, you go get some guy from 1940 and bring him up here and see if he feels bullied. He would, you know what I mean? Like, it's too easy for people to say that, and it's too complicated for that to be the real answer.
That's right.
Yeah, that's how I feel. And so I want to see if we can't shine some light on it, because I think if people saw it differently, not only would they maybe make more space for others in their life, but maybe they would do it for themselves too.
Yes. And that's my hope, is that as we discuss and learn about resilience together, we can understand that it's not as easy as just saying, well, just get more resilient.
Yeah, just do it.
Because do it.
Hurricane's coming. Why don't you just move? Yeah, It's not that easy. So, okay, I got it.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. A huge thank you to Eversense CGM for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Are you tired of having to change your sensor every 7 to 14 days? With the Eversense CGM, you just replace it once every 6 months via a simple in-office visit. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. Arden has been getting her diabetes supplies from US Med for 3 years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. My thanks to US Med for sponsoring this episode and for being longtime sponsors of the Juicebox Podcast. There are links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and all of the sponsors. If you're looking for community around type 1 diabetes, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. But everybody is welcome. Type 1, Type 2, gestational, loved ones, it doesn't matter to me. If you're impacted by diabetes and you're looking for support, comfort, or community, check out Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. To learn more about Erika, visit erikaforsyth.com. If you're not already subscribed or following in your favorite audio app, please take the time now to do that. It really helps the show. And get those automatic downloads set up so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.